Alrighty, so last but not least, we have Sabina Clingerman, and her mentor, Anthony Campbell, is here to introduce her.
Yeah, hello everyone. Great talk so far. Thanks everyone for presenting. I had the pleasure of working with Sabina Clingerman this summer. She's an incoming freshman at Grinnell College. And while our research project twisted and turned during the summer, Sabina kept a positive attitude and worked diligently on mapping and data visualization. She created detailed visualizations of wetland plants that I have used and will continue to use in figures. And she assisted with data analysis and learned about land cover land use classifications and spatial analysis and remote sensing of wetlands. So I'll turn it over to Sabina to talk in detail about her summer work.
Okay, so I'm going to do a screen share then. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Oh. There, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so like Anthony said, my project was on remote sensing and mapping of coastal wetlands. And I'd like to thank Anthony for helping me with this project. It's been really fun to work with him over the summer. There were three main things that I worked on during this internship. The first one was literature review. So I read some scientific articles about satellite imagery types and wetland mapping in a lot of different areas. Not all of it applied to the map making I was doing, but it was interesting to learn about the different processes. I also did map making. I used remote sensing data to classify areas and used that information to create maps in QGIS, which is a free geographic data analysis software. And then finally, I created illustrations using Krita, which is a digital art software. I created illustrations of common wetland plants in Maryland. So the context for my project, coastal wetlands have a lot of biodiversity. They do carbon sequestration, which means they trap carbon dioxide, so there's less in the atmosphere, and they help with flood control and water filtration. Remote sensing is important and really useful because it can cover a large area. It's less disruptive to a wetland, so you don't have to wade through and possibly damage different plants and disrupt the environment. It's user-friendly and it can be done digitally. So I never actually visited Maryland, even though I mapped it, but I didn't need to because we used remote sensing, which was really helpful. So why are coastal wetlands changing? There's a sea level rise because Maryland marshes have more vulnerability due to low sediment supply and microtidal range. And tidal range is the difference between high and low tide. The relevance to NASA, it's relevant to a lot of NASA programs, carbon cycle and ecosystem science, obviously because carbon cycle, it does carbon sequestration and it is an ecosystem. And it also applies to coastal resilience and applied science. So there were two study sites that I mainly focused on. The red section is the eastern shore of Maryland, Astigee Bay, and the little purple section is the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, or SERC. And that is the first thing that I mapped, actually. It's the first area was the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. And I created this map really to show the limits of different geospatial resolutions. So you can see the big green square is the pixel size for MODIS. So MODIS, Landsat, and Sentinel-2 are different satellites, and their images are used to create maps. But the tricky thing is they can have pretty large pixel sizes, and wetlands have so much biodiversity that you really miss out on a lot of information. So if you use MODIS to map this area, as you can see from the huge pixel size, you would get like the whole wetland in one pixel, and you wouldn't be able to include like any information about the difference between them. And the spatial resolution, the numbers, there are in meters. And then I didn't go to this area, but my mentor did, and he took photos. So those photos on the right are actually from this area. So the top ones are upper marsh plants. That middle photo shows a big thing of like a little baby Phragmites, I think. And the photo on the bottom is some lower marsh plants that are actually in this area. So here are the illustrations that I created. So I drew these things that are the plants that are in this area, different high and low marsh plants. And you can see the Phragmites that there was a little baby of on the last picture. That is really common. It is an invasive species, but it's really common. So I drew that, and then I drew, you can really see all the biodiversity, all the different types of plants that are in these areas. And then onto the Eastern Shore comparisons, Astigui Island. So these maps show the purpley maps are not ones that I made. They're the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Coastal Change Analysis Program. So I took that on the left and compared it to a map that I made using very high resolution data from Worldview 2 commercial satellite. So you can see the Coastal Change Analysis Program map has a lot of different options for how things could be classified, but it's got a much larger pixel size, so it kind of misses out on a lot of information. And then I mapped using the Coastal Change Analysis Program maps. I created a little timeline, and I included all of the possible ways that things could be classified. I took out the ones that weren't there on the left one, but I included them on the map on the right. So you can see of all the ways it could be classified. So like it could be classified as tundra. It probably won't be because it's a wetland in Maryland, and I don't know if there's a whole lot of tundra there, but there's a lot of options for how it could be classified compared to the maps that I created. So here's some more maps that I made of Astigui Island, and these just kind of show the change over time. So you can see the one on the right, there's more tidal flat, more of that orange in 2018 compared to 2010. You can, like, it takes a second, and then once your eyes focus on it, you can see like all the difference between, and it's really interesting that that much change in the land happened over 8 years. So now I'm going to talk about Google Earth Engine. This is actually the thing that I started my project with, but then I kind of shifted over to making maps in QGIS. And what we used Google Earth Engine for was actually classifying the different land areas and saying what they were. And what I did in QGIS when I made the maps was taking those classifications and turning them into the actual maps, like saying what color they were and putting them together in a more readable format. So when I did Google Earth Engine, I was just classifying the areas, and I had some trouble with accuracy when I was classifying it. Just the way it works, we had a limited amount of what it could be classified as, which meant that like this beach area on the left was made of sand. I tried to classify it as tidal flat, but it was more similar to farmland in the program. So it classified this beach as farmland, which it obviously isn't. This is a beach right on the coast of Maryland. And then I also had some trouble with the big areas on the left. The spots right on the coast are going to be wetlands, but more inland is going to be like towns and farms and cities and things like that. It's not that much tidal flat. It's not as much as it classified it as. So we really only needed it to be accurate in the areas with marsh, but I still had trouble with how it classified things inaccurately in the other areas too. So I just kind of preferred creating maps in QGIS. And I did use Google Earth Engine maps to make maps in QGIS. So this is a comparison of the very high resolution land cover map, the type of thing that I usually did, compared to Google Earth Engine. And you can see the difference in how it mapped things. You can kind of see the maps on the left had more low marsh and water on the coast compared to the ones on the right that had low and high marsh. There's not as much water like in between the marsh there. So it just, depending on how you're classifying things, it just kind of gets slightly different maps. And that was everything. I have my little bibliography thing. I did have, if there was extra time, 2 other maps that I made. So this one and that one that is actually in South Africa, so not Maryland, but I don't really have enough time to talk about those. So I just wanted to, yeah, does anybody have any questions? I guess my presentation is done now, it looks like.
That was an incredible amount of maps. I want to commend you on all of your work mapping those geographical features. They look awesome.
That was fascinating. So are you going to go to try to visit Assateague now?
If I get a chance to, I was pretty sad that I couldn't go with my mentor, and he had another intern who went there, and I was like, well, I guess not to Assateague, but to the other place, and I was like, what? It's too far away for me to just drive down there. But yeah, it'd be pretty cool. I will definitely appreciate it probably way too much to just be like, look, there's some Phragmites over there.
Any questions for Sabina before we wrap up?
It looks like someone asked what blue carbon is. Blue carbon is the like the blue carbon areas are the areas that are like salt marshes that can kind of take in carbon, take it out of the atmosphere. Like it's just kind of stored in the wetlands. I don't really know you could probably ask Anthony more about that. But yeah, it's crazy how wetlands do that. But yeah, that's called blue carbon, probably because blue like water.
There's a lot of chatter in the chat about among our horse lovers about the islands there over in Maryland. But Lynn had it covered.
I think that is the area. Unfortunately, none of the maps were high enough quality to actually see the horses, so that was sad.
Well, of course, they move around, so it makes it a little trickier compared to the plants. The plants stay still. So when you got the differences in the mapping between the the marsh areas, for example, which one do you think is more correct? The higher resolution one? I mean, is Google basically just suffering from low resolution?
I don't really know, because I guess I didn't as much memorize what I totally forgot what the resolutions of the different things were. I love how the one that I used is called very high resolution, just because that's such a marketing thing. But I guess it's probably like a combination of the two, honestly. Like the one that shows more water, like it's probably less water than that, but more water than the other one is showing. Like I'm guessing just different areas get classified better or worse using different programs. Because if you do classify something using a really high resolution and then you zoom out to a larger area, it looks like so busy because every little dot is like a different color. So it really depends on like how far zoomed out, like how useful it is to have the different, like in terms of showing people how useful it is to have the different sizes of like pixels.
Wendy's asking in the chat if AI classifies the areas or, people like you generally classify the areas.
People like Anthony classify the areas. I didn't do as much classifying the areas, but I think it depends. That one of those two like bonus ones was like one of the two bonus maps at the end there that I didn't end up talking about is compared like there's the machine learning one and yeah, there's like different ways of classifying it and it gets different results. But I didn't do the classifying, so I have no idea how that all goes.
All right. Well, thank you, Sabina, for great work this summer.